Well, hello. It's a pleasure to be able to see you, in a more lively fashion than we usually face each other in the recorded videos that are on the ULAT. Thank you very much for being here, and I hope this is very helpful for you. Uh, I would like to, if my assistant and host would help me, if we could get Mr. Schofstad on here too. In any case, I'm going to introduce him to you at this time. I'm aided by a very capable assistant in the course of this class. His name is Senor Schofstad, or Freddie Schofstad. Freddie was a student of mine, a few years ago, quite a few years ago. And this is a perfect case, there he is, perfect case of the student far outshining the teacher, because he went ahead and majored in Spanish in college, went off and studied in Latin America, like I said, majored in Spanish, became a teacher, and most importantly, married a wonderful Venezuelan woman. And now they speak Spanish quite frequently in the home. And so having Freddie here to assist me is a tremendous privilege for me. And he'll be a great help to you, hopefully, in the future as well. So in any case, I'll go ahead with some of my comments on my own now, and you'll hear from Freddie later on. The purpose of this class is you of course have the introductory videos at the beginning of each lesson, and you may think, well, how is that going to be any different from what we're doing here? When you look at a particular lesson and there's an introductory video at the top, it focuses usually on one skill, one particular topic, lesson. And so its scope is very narrow, whereas here we're looking at the first 7 lessons in the ULAT. And our goal with these classes is to synthesize the topics from the different lessons which we're covering within one session, to lead you into, well, first to model for you conversation, which is what Freddie and I will be doing later on, but also to lead you into conversation, simulated conversation. I should mention, in case you're not aware of this, you can't be seen and you can't be heard. And so you can relax in the comfort of your living room or wherever you are. I'm the one who's on the spot right now. But we'll be leading you into simulated conversation, going back and forth with us. And that's really the purpose of the class, is to move from a synthesis of all the different topics within the range of the lessons we're talking about to conversation back and forth. And we hope it will be helpful to you. So we'll be modeling conversation, simulating conversation. At the end of the class, there'll also be a test. Now this test it's probably the simplest of all the tests you take in the ULAT. Simplest in the sense, I would say it's almost the least beneficial or valuable kind that exists in the ULAT, but it's the only kind that I can monitor or I can administer, you might say, with the limited time that I have with so many people. And so it'll be a multiple choice test. Therefore, you want to have with you a piece of paper and either a pen or a pencil in order to complete that test at the end of the class. And we'll go through and I'll talk through some of the items on that test so you understand why something was incorrect, why the one answer was correct. And I think a very important, of course, I'm speaking English. Maybe some of you didn't know I spoke English, but there will be more English heard, because whereas usually in a classroom situation, or even with you on the ULAT, I may have 5 days a week, 45 minutes at a time or whatever, to interact with you. Here I've got just 1 hour in a week, and so logistically I need to use English a little bit to keep things moving along fairly quickly, so you don't get too lost. But having said that, if you do feel lost, that's okay. I'm thinking especially right now of the non-subscribers who might be watching, who haven't even seen the first 7 lessons of the ULAT. It's okay not to understand what I'm saying. I'll speak in Spanish much of the time. Within the ULAT lessons, I only speak in Spanish, as you know. And therefore, I don't expect you to understand everything I'm saying. If it's really important, I'll find a way to get it across to you, the idea. I mainly want you to hear the music of the language as I'm speaking it to you, even if you don't necessarily understand everything. So just relax and don't worry about what you're not understanding. I guess that's, I want to show you, let me quickly show you my desktop, and I'm going to make sure I'm showing you the right thing. And it looks like I am not. There we go. Now, hopefully you're seeing the ULAT lesson, or the ULAT web page right now. In fact, I'm going to check that again to make sure I didn't, yeah, I got the right, I think I got the right thing here. Okay, so on the ULAT website, any information about this class that you need to have, before you'd write to me with a question, if you would please consult, and I'll scroll down here, hit menu, and we'll scroll down here and look for online classes. If you click on online classes on the ULAT's homepage, you'll find all manner of instruction concerning the logistics of the class, what the class is about. Very important, you'll find a link to this particular class, which will be recorded and put online tomorrow morning sometime. And so if you have friends who would like to, maybe who aren't here for this session, but who'd like to watch it, or if you ever have to miss a session, you can find the link within this online classes for beginners section of the website. It'll give you the link to the video itself. And then secondly, it will also tell you somewhere in here, I've got that section, here it is, what lesson should a student study prior to the next class on September, it'll be 17th as of tomorrow morning. And it'll tell you what lessons that your student, your child should study before attending the next session. One more comment for non-subscribers who can't get past the first 15 lessons of the ULAT. I shouldn't put it that way, it's too negative. Who are blessed to be able to study the ULAT, first 15 free lessons for free, right there, first 15 free lessons. If you click on that section right there on the home page, you'll be able to access the first 15 lessons. Well, that will get you through at least 2 classes, if not 2.5 classes that we're doing here online. But after that point, if you wanted to continue, you probably would want to subscribe to the ULAT, because if you can't follow the lessons and practice them in advance of the session, the online session, you could tend to be kind of lost. All right. I think that's all I want to say by means of introductory remarks. And let me quickly, I'm going to quickly, as quickly as I can, that is to say, unshare my screen. Y ahorita lo que vamos a hacer, vamos a repasar los pronombres, los 5 pronombres que ustedes han aprendido hasta presente. E igualmente vamos a ver los 5 verbos que ustedes han aprendido. Pues, lo que quisiera que ustedes hagan, estoy hablando de yo, de tú, de... ¿Es él o ella? Creo que esto es ella, ¿no? Sí, ella. Él, ustedes reconocen la foto, ¿no? Ese muchacho, y esta es la muchacha que ustedes ven en el ULAT. Entonces, él, ella y usted, ¿ah? Son los 5 pronombres, y los 5 verbos son vivir, hacer, escuchar, lavar y decir, ¿ok? Entonces, lo que vamos a hacer para comenzar, yo creo que ustedes ya han aprendido esos pronombres, entonces, lo que voy a hacer, voy a decir la palabra, y ustedes con las manos van a hacer los gestos, ¿está bien? Entonces, si yo digo tú, ustedes con las manos hacen esto, ¿está bien? Ok, vamos. Yo, ¿qué es yo? ¿Qué es yo? Con las manos, muéstrame, ¿qué es yo? Sí, yo. Él, ¿qué es él? Muy bien, él. Usted, ¿qué es usted? Con las manos, con el cuerpo, usted. Sí, usted. Después, tú, ¿qué es tú? Muy bien, tú, bien. Y ella, ¿qué es ella? Sí, ella, más rápido ahorita. Tú, yo, hagan los gestos antes de mí, yo. Sí, yo, muy bien. Ella, ¿verdad? Usted, él, yo. Muy bien, así es. ¿Comprenden ustedes la diferencia entre tú y usted? Quizá usted no entiende lo que quiere decir. Tú es como yo les hablo a ustedes. Tú, Antonio, María, tú, o Felipe, tú, o yo no sé, Paco, tú, ¿ok? Uso usted cuando estoy hablando con respeto a una persona mayor, a alguien a quien no conozco muy bien, y además una persona a quien no quisiera mostrar respeto. Por ejemplo, este hombre aquí, ¿lo conocen ustedes? ¿Ah? Este hombre, yo no lo conozco, pero yo sé quién es mi tatara abuelo, nunca lo conocí, pero como no lo conozco, como es un hombre mayor, aún más mayor que yo. Entonces, cuando yo le hablo, yo digo, tú, Paco, tú, María, tú, Antonio. Oh, usted, señor, ¿cómo se llama? Se me olvidó cómo se llama. Peacock, sí. Entonces, usted es como hablo con respeto mientras estoy hablando con una persona. Pero este hombre, ¿usted lo conocen? Bueno, lo vieron hace algunos minutos. Ese es Freddy. Freddy es mi amigo. Entonces, cuando hablo con Freddy, yo no digo, usted, Freddy Showstall. No, yo le digo, tú, Freddy, tú eres mi amigo. Yo te aprecio mucho, tú. ¿Está bien? Ahorita. Vamos a ver los verbos. Vamos a ver una presentación PowerPoint que contiene los 5 verbos: vivir, hacer, escuchar, lavar y decir. Y aquí están. Los pueden ver. Otra vez yo voy a confirmar que ustedes están viendo lo que yo estoy viendo. Y ahora sí.
Está bien.
Está bien, bien, está bien. Entonces, aquí tenemos entonces, ¿cuál es este verbo? Díganmelo. ¿Qué es esto? Muy bien, es vivir, ¿verdad? Vivir. Por ejemplo, yo vivo yo vivo en esta, bueno, yo no vivo en esta casa ahora. Antes nosotros vivimos en esta casa, pero una persona puede vivir en una casa. ¿Está bien? Entonces, vivir. Vivir. ¿Cuál es el significado de vivir? Aquí hay una foto muy hermosa del señor Nesby. Entonces, yo vivo ¿cómo? Yo vive, yo vives, yo vivo, yo viva, ¿cuál es? ¿Saben? Bueno, lo que pasa es que nosotros tomamos el verbo entero, que se llama el infinitivo, vivir, y lo que hacemos con yo, ponemos o. Yo, al final del verbo. Yo, en vez de ir, dejamos caer ir, okay, acortamos el verbo y ponemos o al final. Pues yo vivo, yo hago, yo escucho, yo lavo, yo digo, ¿está bien? Entonces yo vivo en Michigan. Yo vivo en Michigan. Tú, por ejemplo, tú vives, ¿verdad? Tú sí, vives, tú escuchas, tú lavas, tú dices, tú haces, ¿verdad? Tú, entonces yo, tú, y por fin, él o ella o usted, acortamos el verbo, ¿verdad? Ahorita entonces, en esta foto podemos decir que yo puedo decir que yo vivo en Michigan, ¿verdad? Y tú vives en, no sé, California, tú vives en Arizona, tú vives en Ohio, tú vives en Nueva York, en Chicago, etcétera. Tú. Ahorita, yo no vivo en California. Él, este muchacho, él sí, si ambos lo dijeron correctamente, vive, él vive, vivir, pero él, cortamos el verbo, vive, él vive en California, esto es vivir, este es el gesto y es la palabra vivir. Después, ella, habla de esa señorita, ella, qué suerte tiene, ella vive en París, a los enfants de la, ella vive en París, ¿verdad? Después, ¿cuál es este verbo? ¿Qué es? Sí, es hacer, es el verbo hacer. Y hacer es un verbo un poco difícil de explicar. Hacer de costumbre es algo que nosotros hacemos con las manos, más o menos, pero es que nosotros reunimos los elementos necesarios para cumplir un proyecto. ¿Ah? Entonces, eso es hacer, hacer. Algunos ejemplos, miren. No es una foto muy clara, muy bonita, pero en esta foto yo hago la cama, ¿verdad? Yo hago la cama, tú haces la cama, ella hace la cama, etc. Entonces, yo hago la cama, Aquí yo, oh, no, yo hago tarea. ¿Les gusta la tarea? ¿Les gusta la tarea? No, a los estudiantes de costumbre no les gusta la tarea. Tienen que tomar, no tengo lápiz. Entonces, tienen que tomar un lápiz, tienen que tomar papel y escribir cosas y leer libros. ¿Ah? Eso es tarea. Los profesores como Freddy dan tarea. ¿Ah? Entonces, aquí yo hago tarea. ¿Y ella? ¿Qué hace ella? Ella hace, ¿ah? Ella hace la comida. Ella hace la comida y eso es buena cosa. Al contrario, ¿no? Por lo contrario, ella hace la comida. Después, hacer, este hombre, este perezoso, él no, hablando del hombre, no del muchacho, pero del hombre que no vemos aquí, a quien no vemos aquí, él no hace nada, no fa niente, él no hace nada, entonces es un perezoso, él no hace nada, eso es hacer. Ahorita, ¿cuál es este verbo? Digan, digan. Si es escuchar, escuchar. Pues, bueno, yo escucho discos, ¿comprenden discos? ¿Saben lo que son discos? No, usted no sabe lo que son discos. Un disco es un tocadiscos, pero ya no existen, creo, casi no existen para nada. Pero yo escucho discos, uno puede escuchar la radio ustedes comprenden mejor lo que es eso. Pues yo escucho la radio y yo escucho, bueno, yo no escucho. ¿Escuchas tú? No necesitamos el tú. ¿Escuchas música en la radio? ¿Sí o no? ¿Escuchas música en la radio? Bien, bien, ustedes dicen, sí, sí, señor Nesby. Yo escucho, yo escucho, sí, escucho música en la radio. Bueno, yo personalmente no. Tú escuchas música en la radio. Yo no escucho música en la radio. Yo escucho béisbol. Y ayer, los Tigres, mi equipo favorito, perdieron 19-0. Increíble. Pero yo escucho béisbol en la radio. Después, ¿cuál es este verbo? Sí, lavar. Muy bien, es el verbo lavar. Y pues en esta foto, digan, por favor, digan. Yo sé que estoy hablando de mí, pero traten de decir la frase. ¿Sí? Yo lavo, sí, los trastes. En esta foto, yo lavo los trastes, cosa muy rara, diría mi esposa. Y aquí, pero yo no lavo la ropa, no lavo la ropa. Mi esposa, ella, no esta señorita, pero ella, mi esposa, perdón, eso es él. Ella, pero no la chica, la mamá, ella lava la ropa. Ella lava la ropa en nuestra familia. Mi esposa lava la ropa en nuestra familia. Y aquí yo me lavo las manos. Pues comprenden lavar, ¿verdad? Ok. Y por fin, el último de los 5 verbos es, sí, decir. Muy bien, decir. Pues, aquí, por ejemplo, yo digo hola, y yo digo muchas gracias, o yo digo adiós, me voy, yo digo adiós, eso es decir. ¿Que está bien? Pues ustedes han visto los 5 verbos. Ahorita lo que vamos a hacer, vamos a tomar los pronombres y los verbos. Entonces tenemos 10 en total, un total de 10 palabras de vocabulario que ustedes deben conocer a fondo. Entonces, lo que quisiera que ustedes hagan, yo voy a decir las palabras con las manos, hagan los gestos, ¿ok? Usen las manos. ¿Están listos? Vamos. Tú, ¿qué es tú? ¿Qué es tú? Tú. Sí, tú, muy bien. Escuchar. Escuchar, muy bien. Hacer. Hacer. Antes de mí. Hagan los gestos antes de mí, no después. ¿Ok? Él, ¿qué es él? Él. Yo. Tú. Hacer. Ser. Decir. ¿Qué es decir? Decir. Sí, decir. Muy bien. Ella. Sí, ella. Lavar. Lavar. Más rápido. Yo. Sí, yo. Escuchar. Escuchar. Vivir. Estaba hablando francés. Sí, vivir. Hacer. Hacer. Decir. Decir. Usted. Usted, ok, basta. Ahorita vamos a cambiar la actividad. Vamos a, esta vez yo voy a hacer los gestos con la mano, las manos, y ustedes, perdón, no, con las manos no. Ustedes van a decir las palabras. ¿Están listos? Vamos a comenzar lentamente y después acelerar. Pues, ¿qué es esto? Digan, ¿qué es esto? Sí, tú. Hacer. Ajá. Lavar. Yo. Usted. Decir. Ella, muy bien. Él, así es. Perdón, ustedes actualmente están viendo mi monitor y no lo necesitan. Ok, más rápido. ¿Están listos? Ok, entonces yo les voy, lo que voy a hacer, yo voy a seguir haciendo los gestos. Dime las palabras. Tú. Vivir. Decir. Digan. Yo. Esto. Ella. Y esto. Es de mi perra. Él, sí, ¿verdad? Esto. Escuchar. Lavar, y eso basta, está bien. Pues hemos repasado los verbos y los pronombres. Ahorita lo que vamos a hacer, sí, voy a animar una conversación con mi amigo Freddy. Entonces, un momentito, espero verlo en un momento. Pero aún si no lo veo, le voy a hablar. Sí, aquí está. Entonces,
Hola.
por favor, jóvenes, escuchen la conversación y traten de comprender tanto como es posible acerca de la vida de las dos personas. Vamos a ver cómo somos diferentes, cómo somos semejantes y cómo ustedes son diferentes de nosotros. Got it? Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to listen to this conversation between Mr. Schofstau and me. And afterwards, I'll ask you some questions about this conversation. And then we'll morph into a situation where he will be asking you questions about yourself, carrying on a conversation with you. And again, I remind you, no one can see or hear you, so relax. And then he'll ask you some questions, etc. Here we go. All right. Aquí estás.
Aquí.
Buenas noches, señor.
Buenas noches.
By the way, I'm going to be speaking to him like this. I'm going to be saying usted. Freddy es mi amigo, no le hablo de usted de costumbre. Yo digo tú, pero quisiera que ustedes oigan la forma de usted. So I'm using usted with him. Normally I would say tú to Freddy. He's my friend, my buddy. But even though he's a couple years younger than I am. But I want you to hear the usted form. So I'm going to say usted. Buenas tardes, buenas noches, señor.
Buenas noches.
¿Cómo se llama usted?
Me llamo Freddy. ¿Y usted cómo se llama?
Me llamo señor Nesby. Mucho gusto.
Igualmente.
Bueno, señor Freddy, ¿cómo está usted? Muy bien, así, mal, triste, cansado.
Un poco cansado, pero estoy bien. Estoy bien.
Bien.
¿Y usted cómo está?
Más o menos. Estoy cansado porque esa es la segunda clase que enseño y a mi edad soy viejo. Es difícil.
Habla mucho.
Tiempo.
Habla mucho.
Sí, hablo mucho, demasiado. Bueno, ¿vive usted en México, en Europa? ¿Vive usted en los Estados Unidos?
Yo no vivo en México.
No.
No vivo en Europa. Sí vivo en los Estados Unidos.
Bien.
De hecho, vivo en Michigan.
En Michigan, qué interesante.
Michigan, sí. ¿Y dónde vive usted?
Bueno, qué interesante porque yo también, yo vivo en Michigan. Pues quizá nos veremos algún día.
Sí.
Señor, bueno, en su familia, en su casa, ¿hace usted la cama? ¿Hace usted la comida? ¿Hace usted la comida, sí?
Bueno, las dos preguntas. Yo no hago la cama. Es malo, es malo.
Aprecio su franqueza.
Sí, sí. A veces yo hago la
¿Sí?
comida.
¿De
A
veras?
veces hago la comida. A veces.
¿Usted sabe cocinar?
Un poco. Al pollo, pescado, los espaguetis, delicioso.
Bravo, felicidades.
Sí, mi esposa, ella hace la comida.
Usted está casado.
Sí, sí, sí,
Felicidades, está bien. ¿Tiene
gracias.
hijos?
Tengo un hijo,
Qué bueno. ¿Cómo se llama su hijo?
Él, mi hijo, mi bebé,
Eh,
se llama Samuel. Se llama,
Samuel. Qué
es
nombre más
precioso.
bonito. Bien. Ahora, la comida. Pregúntame a mí.
Sí,
Pregúnteme a mí, señor.
hace la comida, ¿verdad? Hace
No,
la comida, usted,
no,
¿no?
no. Yo no hago la comida. Yo no sé cocinar. Mi
Nunca.
esposa, no la chica, sino mi esposa. Ella hace, ella hace la comida y prepara una comida sabrosa. Anoche me hizo pico de gallo.
Oh, pico de gallo
Sí.
con papas, con las tortillas.
Bueno, tuvimos anoche frijoles y enchilada. No. Ah, ¿Cómo se llama? Ah, no me acuerdo, pero fue muy bueno. Entonces, bueno, usted prepara la comida a veces, pero cuando no prepara la comida, cuando no hace la comida, lava los trastes, lava usted los trastes.
Es necesario, sí. Yo no hago la comida, mi esposa hace la comida,
Sí,
mi responsabilidad, lavo los trastes, yo lavo los trastes. Importante.
buen hombre, buen esposo.
¿Y usted lava los trastes?
No, yo no lavo los trastes, pero yo doy de comer a las gallinas. Yo doy
Ok.
de comer a las gallinas. Esa es mi responsabilidad. Y recoger los huevos también. Señor, ¿escucha usted música?
Sí, escucho la música clásica, escucho la música rock,
Sí,
también escucho la radio,
sí.
escucho béisbol, tristemente a veces, pero sí escucho béisbol. Sí, sí, me gusta escuchar música.
Bien, bien.
Sí. ¿Y usted escucha la música?
Bueno, pues sí, a veces escucho música clásica, a veces música rock también, y yo escucho béisbol en la radio.
Ok.
Bueno, yo veo que ya es tarde, yo me tengo que ir, entonces muchas gracias por haber pasado tiempo conmigo.
De nada, gracias por hablar conmigo también.
Ok, chao, nos vemos.
Chao, nos
Adiós.
vemos. Adiós.
Ok, ¿dónde estamos actualmente? Sí. Ok, yo les voy a hablar a ustedes, los jóvenes, y Freddy va a volver en un momentito. Freddy, tú puedes quedarte, pero yo les voy a hacer algunas preguntas a los muchachos. ¿Y cuál es la hora? Bueno, está bien. No, estamos bien, ok. Entonces, primero, ¿cómo se llama el hombre? ¿Cómo se llama este hombre con quien estoy hablando? Digan, que respondan, díganme. Sí, él, hablando no del muchacho, sino de Freddy. Sí, sí, miren. Freddy, yo tengo su foto. Pues él, él se llama Freddy, o él se llama el señor Showstar. Después, ¿cómo está Freddy? ¿Está bien? ¿Está más o menos? ¿Está así, así? ¿Está mal? ¿Cómo está Freddy? Sí, Freddy está cansado porque es profesor de español y trabaja durante el día entero en la escuela con jóvenes como usted, aún peor que ustedes quizá. Y Freddy está cansado, pero dice que está muy bien. ¿Y vive Freddy en México? ¿Sí o no? ¿Vive Freddy? Aquí está Freddy otra vez. ¿Vive Freddy vive, pero es una pregunta. ¿Vive Freddy en México? ¿Sí o no? Digan. Sí, verdad. Freddy no vive en México. ¿Vive Freddy en los Estados Unidos? Sí, él, hablando de Freddy, oh, perdón, sí, es él. Él vive en los Estados Unidos. Él vive en Michigan, como yo. Después, ¿hace Freddy la cena? ¿Hace la cena? I'm going to take a quick time out here. You may have already picked up in the first 7 lessons, but I think it's probably not until unit 2 that you'll really start to notice this. Did you notice that I don't always have to say the subject of the sentence in Spanish? I just, for example, I said, vive Freddy, no, I said, hace Freddy la cena. Freddy hace, una pregunta, hace Freddy la cena? Well, we already know we're talking about Freddy. Huh? Why do I need to keep repeating his name? No, in Spanish, if it's understood about whom you're speaking, you can drop the subject, just like you were saying in English. Hey, lives in United States? You don't have to say, does he live in? Just lives in the United States. I don't know if you picked that up already, but you will. In the first unit of the ULAT, I will almost invariably say yo or tú or ella or él. I got them right, okay, or usted. But truly, in the context of a conversation, as long as it's understood about whom you're speaking, you don't have to say yo or tú or ella or él or usted. Now, usted is tricky. In the ULAT, you will always hear me say usted, almost always in a sentence. Here's why. When you're showing respect to a person, an older person, and you're in the midst of a conversation with them, maybe it's an eight sentence conversation, 8 things you'll say to them. Maybe 2 times those 8, you're going to repeat the word usted. Whereas in the other sentences, you'll just drop usted. You'll just use the verb. You won't say the subject because it's understood you're talking to him. But you'll throw that usted in there once in a while to just reaffirm that you're speaking respectfully to this person. Well, because if I were to start dropping it, you might drop it every time. I'd rather you be too polite than too impolite. And so in the ULAT, I always say usted, even if truly you could drop it. Does that make any sense to you? Well, whether it does or not, let's push on. Let me continue with some questions for you. Hey, hablando de Freddy, ¿lava los trastes, sí o no? ¿Lava Freddy los trastes, sí o no? Sí, él lava los trastes. A veces, cuando prepara la comida, cuando hace la comida, no lava los trastes, pero si no, lava los trastes. Y entonces escucha música, etcétera, etcétera. Ok, está bien. Pero ¿dónde estamos? Perfecto. Ahorita, lo que vamos a hacer ahorita, Freddy les va a hablar y él les va a hacer algunas preguntas. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to kind of disappear and you're going to, Freddy is going to talk to you, asking you the questions that I was, but about yourself. So the conversation is now between Freddy and you, and I'm going to, voy a irme. Chao.
Hola a todos. Voy a hacerles unas preguntas. Vamos a tener una conversación. Vamos a conversar. Okay, voy a comenzar. ¿Cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo se llama usted? ¿Cómo se llama usted? Ah, me llamo Freddy. ¿Y cómo estás? ¿Estás bien? ¿Estás mal? ¿Estás más o menos? ¿Cómo estás? Ah, ¿cómo estoy yo? ¿Cómo está usted? Yo estoy cansado, pero estoy bien. Estoy bien. ¿Y vives en los Estados Unidos? ¿Vives en Michigan? No, no vives en Michigan. Ah, ¿dónde vive? ¿Vive usted en los Estados Unidos? Sí, sí, yo vivo en los Estados Unidos. Vivo en los Estados Unidos. Vivo en Michigan. Ah, hacer, vamos, la palabra hacer, el verbo hacer. ¿Haces la comida? ¿Haces tú la comida? ¿Hace usted la comida? ¿Hace usted la comida? Sí, yo hago la comida. Yo hago la comida. Importante. Comer. Importante. ¿Lavas ¿Lavas tú los trastes? ¿Lavas tú los trastes en tu casa? ¿En la casa? A veces lavo los trastes. Mi esposa hace la comida, lavo los trastes. Mi responsabilidad. Dos preguntas más. ¿Escuchas la música? Sí, sí, escucho la música. La pregunta, ¿escucha música usted? ¿Escucha música usted? Sí, escucho la música. Escucho la música mucho, la música rock, la música clásica y todo eso. Sí. Una pregunta más. Escucha otra vez. ¿Escuchas la radio? ¿La radio? ¿Escuchas la radio? ¿Escuchas tú la radio? ¿Escucha usted la radio? ¿Escucha usted la radio? Sí, escucho la radio, especialmente en el carro. En el carro escucho la radio. Gracias por hablar conmigo y espero que hablemos más en el futuro. Bien hecho.
Muchas gracias, Freddie. Fue excelente. I'd like to just make some comments to all of you about the conversation with Freddie. Notice that he said to you, sometimes he said, escuchas la radio or lavas los trastes. But sometimes he said, lavas tú. It's kind of to help you out a little bit. He threw the word tú in there. Lavas tú la radio. Escuchas, no, no. Lavas tú los trastes y escuchas la radio. He would throw the tú in there also to kind of help you along as to whom he was speaking. But notice that he didn't have to use it. Several times he didn't. And how would you know that he's speaking to you if he doesn't say tú? If he says, escuchas la radio or lavas los trastes, how would you know he's talking to you and not talking about somebody else? Have you figured it out? Because at the end of haces or escuchas or lavas, hearing s, remember the ending of the verb s is always associated with tú. meaning the person, if you hear s at the end of the verb, that means the person's talking to you. If you hear, you're not going to hear ch, but if you hear the verb chopped off, it means the person's talking about somebody else, or they're speaking to you respectfully. Good luck. Haven't that ever happened for a few years? And if you hear them with an O at the end of their verb, their action, you know they're talking about themselves, right? Okay. In any case, enough grammar. Time for, no, it's not enough grammar, enough lighthearted grammar. Now it's the heavy stuff. It's time for a test. Grab your pen or a pencil and a piece of paper. I'm going to share my screen. In fact, I'm already sharing my screen with you, I think. And I'm going to give you a multiple choice test.
You'll need to share the screen again, Senor Nesbitt.
Oh, okay, I'll get it straightened out here. Gracias, joven. Let me get this guy out of the way here. Oh, okay. Por aquí and por aquí. Okay. ¿Pueden ver mi monitor ahorita? ¿Pueden ver el Excel 1.4? Okay, está bien. So we're in lesson 1.4. And we're going to take test number, you don't know which one it is, right? That's what it's supposed to be when you take a test. Your authority, whether it's a teacher or a parent, some kind of monitor, is going to, at the last minute, tell you to take test number 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, or for the oral comprehension tests, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And I'm telling you right now, so you have to prepare all of them, but you don't know which one you're actually going to take, so you have to prepare them all very thoroughly. We're going to take test number 2. Here we go. This is test number 2 in the multiple choice section, and I'm going to say A, B, C, or D. As you can probably guess what that means, A, B, C, D. And you're going to have to come up with the correct form of the statement that corresponds to these pictures. I'm going to say 4 statements, only one of them is correctly said. So look at the pictures first, think how you would say that statement, and then I'll give you the 4 possibilities, and you write down A, B, C, or D. A, B, C, or D. By the way, why Detroit? Porque yo nací en Detroit cuando fui bebé. I was born in Detroit. That's my hometown, and so it gets priority here. The rest of you probably don't relate too much to Detroit at this point in your lives. Okay, vamos. Entonces, número 1. Momentito, voy a buscar mi texto. Okay, número 1, and I'm going to only say these one time. So listen carefully the first time. So look carefully at the picture, think how you'd say this, and listen for the right statement. Okay, just one time. A, ella vive en Detroit. B, él viva en Detroit. C, el vivir Detroit. D, él vive en Detroit. Número 2. Look here again at the images. Decide how you would say it. And then listen to my 4 statements and pick the right one. A, tú vives en Detroit. B, tú vive en Detroit. C, usted vive en Detroit. D, usted vives en Detroit. Número 3. Look at the pictures. Think how you'd say it. And here we go. A, tú vives en Detroit. B, usted vive en Detroit. C, usted vivir en Detroit. D, usted vivo en Detroit. Número 4. A, usted hace la cama. B, usted hace los trastes. C, usted haga los trastes. D, usted hace los trastes. Número 5. Look at the picture. Think how you'd say this. Okay. A, tú hace la cama. B, usted hace la cama. C, tú haces la cama. D, tú hacer la cama. Okay. Número 6. Miren las imágenes. Okay. Okay, here we go. A, él escucha música. B, el escuchar música. C, el escucho música. D, el escuchas música. Número 7. Miren, piensen y vamos. A, tú escuchar música. B, usted escuchar música. C, usted escucha música. D, tú escuchas música. Número 8. Miren, piense y vamos. Él escucha música. B. Ella escucha música. C. El escuchar música. D. Ella escuchar música. 9. Miren. A. Él se lava las manos. B. Él lava los trastes. C. Él lava las manos. D. Él se lava los trastes. 10. Miren. Y vamos. Tú lavas los trastes. B. Tú lavas los trastes. C. Tú lavar los trastes. D. Tú lavo los trastes. 11. Okay. Miren. Vamos. El diga hola. B. El decir hola. C. El dice hola. D. El decir hola. Y número 12. Miren. Piensen en la frase y vamos. A. Él dice hola. B. Él dices hola. C. Ella dices hola. D. Ella dice hola. Okay, this is how you would, if you were studying this on your own, this is in the midst, one of the sections of lesson 1.4. There are 4 different forms of this same kind of test. At the end of the section, you see a little mouse there, a symbol of a mouse. If you click on it, it will open for you the correct answer. So there you see the answers. We'll just go through them real quickly and then we'll talk about them in a moment if we have time. We do. DAB, ACA, DBB, BCD. One more time, quickly. DAB, ACA, DBB, BCD. And if by chance you didn't catch all that, you can go to lesson 1.4 and look for yourself. This is test number 2 we're doing in the comprehension, oral comprehension section. Now, want to know what your score is? For you math wizards out there, you've probably already figured it out. But nonetheless, if you want to cheat a little bit, go to the top, which is just before test number 1, the top of that section, which by the way is section 9, and you see a percent sign. If you click on the percent sign, it gives you the grading scale or the guide for any test. And in this case, there are 12 items there. If you have 0 mistakes, 100%, 1 mistake, 92, 2 mistakes, 83. So just take a look at that there and see where you stand or fall on that scale. All right. And of course, if you perform too poorly and Mr. Nesbitt, we didn't do it clearly enough, or you have technical difficulties, you can always go back to lesson 1.4, section 9, and take the test again under the supervision of your teacher or a parent or whomever. Okay, well, the last few minutes here, I just like to, we have 10 minutes to go, I think. I may not need all that time, but if you have any questions for me as teacher, as parents, you might want to consider writing them to the host of this class, and he can relay them to me. Otherwise, I just have a few comments I want to make to you. So let me find my notes. I'm sharing my screen. I don't need to. And where am I? My notes are right here. Okay, here we go. First of all, the ULAT does not represent the easiest way to learn a foreign language. Not at all. The easiest way is the way I learned back in the 1960s. I learned French first, then Spanish for 2 years in college. That was it. I learned by means of translation, by means of the written word. That is to say, from the first week of class, we were doing writing exercises. We were memorizing written dialogues, which I can still repeat now 50 or some years later. We did, like I said, reading and writing assignments for homework. We had verb conjugation charts. Yo hago, tú haces, it was in French, but él hace, ella hace, usted hace, nosotros. We had written grammar rules to memorize. But you know what that does? What that creates in a student's mind? It destroys their ability to speak the language in a fluent fashion. If one learns with a written word as the foundation as an early beginning student, the written word is the foundation to their learning, it dooms the student. It gives the student the ability to analyze the language and to explain it to others, its structure, in a very analytical, studious fashion. It doesn't allow them to speak it. In fact, it dooms them to never speaking with fluency, because a native speaker speaks in a three-step thought process. They go from the level of concept to an inner verbalization of the statement they want to make, and almost instantaneously, because of the wonder of the human brain, they make the statement in their native language, okay? But if you learn by means of translation, and I'm sure some of your parents right now are deeply tempted to translate everything for your child, because you want them to be comfortable. You want them to know exactly what this word means in English. Well, what that does, it means they always have to pass their knowledge of the language through the grid of English first before they can actually speak it. If you want to read my ebook, which is on the website, look under About, you'll find it's called In Other Words. Read my ebook. I think it was chapter 3 or 4. I talk a great deal about this 5-step thought process that's created by premature exposure to the written language. It's created in the mind of a student who learns by means of a premature exposure to the written language. It's not good. So the bottom line is, easy is not best, okay? If you've lived in another country, like I lived in France for 13 years, you know that learning to speak a language well is not an easy matter. If we make it easy, we ruin the student, because we're ruining their thought process. Also, be patient with your child, and be patient with their imprecision of understanding. Think of them as what they are, an 18-month-old as far as linguistics, linguistically, as far as the Spanish language is concerned. They, when your child was 18 months old, and a truck went rumbling down your street, and your 18-month-old child said, "Car," you didn't say to him, "It's not a car, it's a truck. What is wrong with?" No, you were delighted with their ability to come close, to express that it was a vehicle of some kind. Well, that's the way you need to approach your child's learning right now. Don't try and make everything easy for them. Allow them to have an imprecise understanding, because by means of repetition in the ULAT and repetition in context, in sentences which have a context, their precision of understanding will greatly grow. Learn with your child. There's nothing better than a parent learning the language with a child, because that naturally provides the student, with a conversation partner right in the home. So I highly encourage that. And then last of all, I just want to remind, especially if you weren't there at the beginning of the class, on the ULAT website, let me go back to this is what the home page looks like. If you go down, hit menu, actually you won't have to hit menu if you're using a monitor, but if you're on a smartphone, hit menu, and then go down and look for online classes. If you click there, you'll find all the information you need. You don't need to write me emails unless somehow some information sneaked past me and I didn't put it on this page. But almost everything you need to know, including the link to this recorded video. If you have friends, you think this class was worthwhile, and you'd like to tell other families about the ULAT program and about these classes, there'll be a link on that section, the online classes section, to this recorded video, this session. And in addition, you'll also see what lessons your child needs to study for the next week, next Thursday. And also, within 24 hours or so, I'll be putting a schedule of classes on there for you to consult. I think that's it.
Questions. We have some questions from the audience. Do you have time for them?
I thought there might be. We got 5 minutes. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, first question comes from Paul. He asked, how do you recommend integrating writing into the curriculum?
Writing is extremely important. I wrote an ebook, didn't I? And so I believe in writing. Writing is very important. The key is when you introduce it. You introduce the written language when the student is able to, it has, as what's the term I use? It's a relative oral fluency. There's a certain pace that I want a student to be able to attain first in their oral expression before I ever introduce them to the written language. In the ULAT, very specifically, you'll see that we go from listening and speaking to phonics instruction and reading, and then finally to writing much later. So Freddie, for example, the fellow who's just here interviewing you, Freddie in his class didn't get to writing the language. He started as a 9th grader studying Spanish, somewhat halfway to a quarter or halfway through the 10th grade year. A year and a quarter went by when all I did was interact with him orally. Because if you start with a written language and then try to get students to speak, it's like trying to pull teeth. It's terrible. If you start with a spoken language and then teach them to read and write, it's very, very easy, especially a phonetic language like Spanish. And so the ULAT in the beginning of Unit 2, after about 50 lessons, introduces phonics and then finally elementary reading. And then it's not until the end of the first year, Unit 5, when the students are introduced to the written language. So both need to be established, both need to be focused on, but the key is when. First lay a strong oral foundation, and then reading and writing go very, very simply, teaching those skills.
All right, next question,
okay,
just to keep moving. Next questions, someone said, you probably answered this a little bit already in some of what you shared after the lesson, but they asked if there are worksheets to go along with the lessons. So you talked about kind of the differences in the worksheet approach, that you don't necessarily use the same approach as you traditionally use, but what are the kind of recommendations you'd have for how people would practice the lessons or review them, that kind of thing?
Well, if they're subscribers of the ULAT, really simply do the activities within the first seven lessons in this case, but within the ULAT program, do the lessons, do them to the point of mastery, repeat, because they're far more living than a piece of paper with instructions on it, like a worksheet. Having the visual, having the auditory, having sound involved is far more dynamic at this point for what you need to be learning than having a worksheet of some kind. So if you're a non-subscriber, you're going to have difficulty really following the class, of course. If you are a subscriber, do the lessons and do them to the point of relative mastery. Take the tests at the end of each, well, whenever a test occurs, you'll see a stop sign indicating there's a test, or you'll see, you'll be able to recognize the test. You'll see a start and a stop sign for the countdown clock. So I would say at least get an 80% result on any test you take.
Okay, we have a question from one of the students asking, which of the tests did we take for 1.4? Was that 1, 2, 3, or 4?
You took 2, the second one.
That's a quick one. And then last one will end. A couple of people asked how many languages you speak, but I answered that, so we won't get that. We'll do a fun one for the last one. How long did it take you to learn Spanish?
Well, you may have heard me say in the middle of the class that I took 2 years in college. That was it. And I didn't learn Spanish. Freddie is far more fluent than I, because he speaks on a regular basis and he studied in Latin America. I've spent a grand total of just a few weeks in a Spanish-speaking country. I studied French for 12 years, from 5th grade through 12th grade. That's not 12 years, but and then all through college, majored in French, studied in France, lived in France for 13 years. That's the language I should be teaching. But in America, Spanish is the language which is demanded currently. 80% of the ULAT subscribers are studying Spanish. And so when I was a classroom teacher, I had to adapt. I had to teach Spanish as opposed to French. And therefore, the beginning year or 2 years, I feel relatively comfortable teaching. But the more advanced levels, you need a person like Freddie to be teaching. I need a person like Freddie to be helping me teach. So in any case, this is the key. If you learn one language, and French and Spanish are very similar, you can learn the second language far, far faster. So I had 2 years of Spanish in college, nothing in high school. That was it. Spent a few weeks in Puebla, Mexico, 3 weeks in Puebla, Mexico. And I studied almost 50 years ago in Guadalajara for 2 months in Mexico.
I think that's all we have time for.
Gracias. Ha sido un placer y nosotros nos vemos la semana que viene. It's been a real nice time. Good to see you, and I'll see you next week.